We're actually on Daf Yud Aleph, and we're about 10 lines before the Mishnah. I'll just count up. There's two dots. There's a Mishnah on the bottom of the page, and 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 dots, 12 lines before the Mishnah. Right, V'miskila, correct. And then we'll get back to talk about Shabbos or Erev Shabbos things, and it's a reasonably nice piece of Gemara until about it's a reasonably fairly straightforward piece of Gemara about Shabbos until about Yud Gimel Amud Beis, where when Yud Gimel Amud Beis is about 4 dapim of Tumah Tahara. I heard that happy sound. Okay.
That was a general crowd.
So sorry. Okay. But anyways, we're not at Yud Gimel Amud Beis yet. We're still in Yud Aleph, so it's nice. Okay. So let's just take a jump back to the Mishnah. We had the second Mishnah in the Masechta, which was about, on Daf Tet Amud Beis. It's on, okay? On Tet Amud Beis. And the Mishnah said, this talked about things not to do before Mincha. Right? So just read through very quickly. Just going to need one piece of the Mishnah at the very end. Lo yeshiv adam lefnei hasaper samach lamincha ad shispal. A person shouldn't go, to the haircut or stand before the barber. Go to the barber before he daven mincha. Lo yikanes lefnei adam lamercha. This person shouldn't go into the bathhouse. V'lo leburski, not to a tannery. V'lo lechol, shouldn't sit down to a big meal. It's like a suda of a bar mitzvah meal or a big repast. V'lo ladin, shouldn't start a judgment. Okay, so all of these are. The common denominator is not to get involved in long, extensive things or things that may become more extensive, so that you won't forget the time to daven mincha. However, says the Mishnah, if you did start, right? You started the Din Torah, you went into the tannery, you ended up in the merchatz, the barber started cutting, and there was a whole discussion what is considered starting, right? Then lo yafsik, mafsik, and then you don't stop. You just continue what you're going to do. The assumption is that if everything goes according to Hoyle, you'll be out in time to daven mincha. Right? Okay. Period. Now, then the Mishnah says, mafsikin. And then you see a parentheses there in most of the Gemara, so I'm not sure what you have in Mr. Scheinzel. Okay. Right. Mafsikin likros kriya shema or lik kriya shema. It's really the same thing. Right. Okay. So mafsikin likros kriya shema v'yem mafsikin l'tefillah. So then the Mishnah says you stop for kriya shema, even if you start. It looks like apparently even if you started these items, right? V'yem mafsikin l'tefillah. But once you started, you don't stop for tefillah. The difference between tefillah and kriya shema. Right, Kriya Shema is the Raisa. So even if now, what Kriya Shema are we talking about? It's not going to be Mincha. Right. So it's not Mincha, so the simple pshat is, well, it could be it was time for Ma'ariv, or it was time for Shachar, or something like that. The Gemara's discussion is going to be, there seems to be a disconnect. I mean, right away you felt there's a disconnect. One is talking about Mincha, and then it's talking about Ma'ariv. Second of all, even assuming it's talking about Tefillah in general, okay, whatever the tefillah is, it doesn't say mafsikin l'mincha. It says miskila mafsikin, right? And then it says again mafsikin l'kriyat shema mafsikin l'tefillah. I just said mafsikin l'tefillah. So what am I saying here? I mean, if anything, if I was going to write the Mishnah, I would have written lo yeshiv adam lefnei hasaper da 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 v'miskilo mafsikin l'tefillah umafsikin l'kriyat shema.
Right.
Right. It looks like there's a different stitch of the Mishnah going on here. It almost looks like a standalone piece. It looks like two pieces were melded together, and they don't match together exactly. Right now, you and I would say, well, okay, they're two separate mishnayos. Maybe they are two separate mishnayos, but why do I have to say again mafsikin or mafsikin l'tefillah? I just said mafsikin, so I could have said mafsikin. However, mafsikin l'kriyat shema. Right. So the Mishnah.
On a simple pshat, why should you stop for Kriyat Shema? Because you can do Kriyat Shema all the entire night.
Because the concern why I shouldn't start is the fear that I may forget. So we say, well, if you started, it's only a fear that you may forget, but it's only Rabbanan, so you probably won't forget. But Kriyat Shema it looks like you should do it. So those, or maybe even that's maybe part of the Gemara's question. Why would Kriyat Shema be a little different than Tefillah? What is going on here that Kriyat Shema suddenly stands out here? So the Mishnah is going to say that actually this last 6 words or 5 words of the Mishnah, Mafsikin l'Kriyat Shema ve'Mafsikin l'Tefillah, is actually talking about a separate issue altogether. It's really not related to it. It's one of these kind of things that you've got to say, well, where does it say it? And the Gemara assumes that you have to understand what was being said. So let's go now to Daf Yud Aleph and Aleph.
Why don't you say that Bavli for Mincha and Erev Shabbat, and the Sefer is for Stam for all the tefillos? You could
Because it, which means that you shouldn't go to a barber Erev Shabbos. It doesn't say that.
Yeah.
It says it's clearly Samach LaMincha Achi Yispalel. Any mincha. In fact, you'll see the next Mishnah, which we're going to get to today, is not about mincha, is about Samach LaChashecha, about sunset for Shabbos. So the next Mishnah is about Shabbos. This Mishnah here really seems to have nothing to do with Shabbos per se. What Jonathan is saying is assume the whole thing is about Shabbos. Right? So, but if you look at the terminology being used is about Tefillah and about Mincha, it's about, and Kriyat Shema has nothing to do with Shabbos. It's a Tefillah kind of Mishnah.
Sounds like it.
Right, and the reason actually it's here is sometimes the Mishnayos put two similar topics, 2 topics that have similar laws, one after the other. Right? Look. These Mishnayos were organized by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, by Rabbi. We don't know what the early Mishnayos actually were organized at, the initial organizational thing. So sometimes, some people have suggested, if you look, for example, some Masechtas, that there are different, similar halachas that get lumped together, but the topics are very different. If you remember back in Megillah, we had a whole bunch of Ein Bain. Ein Bain, Ad Rishon, Ad Sheni. Then it went to Ein Bain, Bama Gedola, Bama Ketana, Shabbos and Yontif. So what was that? That was a whole unit of Ein Bains. If you think of trying to memorize material for the way your brain even organizes things, like the brain doesn't organize it in a neat filing cabinet. Right? The brain can put blue ocean next to, blue ink, right? Or feeling blue sometimes. But at any rate, so this may have been part of a grouping of Mishnayos, this Mishnah, followed by the Mishnah on Yud Aleph, which we'll get to. One had to do it before Pin Mincha, one had to do it before Shabbos. I understand the question, but if you read it, it looks clearly that it's not talking about Shabbos. Okay? The real issue is in this previous Mishnah, this is the last piece that we didn't get to last time, it seems to be two pieces. So the Mishnah was on Tet Mid, you saw that?
Yeah.
We're on Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph,
Okay, so
12 lines before the Bab, there's a Mishnah at the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
And 12 lines before that.
Okay.
Imit Chilu. Okay, the first word on the line is going to be Yosef Afilu B'Shabbos. Imit Chilu im mafsikin l'Kriyat Shema. So the Gemara asks a question based upon these last 5 or 6 words of the Mishnah. Hatanale Reisha ein mafsikin. The Mishnah already told us ein mafsikin. Once you started the Din Torah, once the barber started cutting, once you went into the tannery and picked up the skins, ein mafsikin. So the Gemara says Seifa asan l'divrei Torah. So the topic of the Mishnah is not dealing with going into a burski, not going into a barber. It's about specifically a group that is getting together to study Limud Torah, right? And therefore, the Tanya Chaverim Shay Oskim B'Torah Mafsikin L'Kriyat Shema Ve'im Mafsikin L'Tefillah. It's a completely separate issue. In other words, Rashi used the term, says Mil Sachrina Nakatlei. So, so if their group is learning Torah, they have to stop for Kriyat Shema, right? Even though they're studying Torah, and you may have thought that perhaps Torah trumps everything else, but they don't have to stop for. In other words, this is not about starting something; it's about a group that's learning. So the group has to stop for Kriyat Shema. The group does not have to stop for tefillah. They can continue their learning until the tefillah is until they stop, and then they can daven tefillah.
So they're saying in effect that this really is something separate and nothing to do.
Right. So the first part of the mission is dealing with going right. The first part of the mission is doing things that you may get extended. The second part of the mission is simply about studying Torah. Even Torah, which is the highest level, you still have to stop for Kriyat Shema.
Total non sequitur. Total like.
Correct. Complete break. Right. So in other words, it's almost as if to say there are 3 topics. One topic was getting close to Mincha. The second topic is about learning Torah. And then the third topic is going to be the Mishnah which comes up, which is about getting close to Shabbos. That's exactly what they come to say. Kriyat Shema Shel Shachris.
Excellent.
They don't say the time for davening is now. Right, time for Shema.
So that's according to this Mishnah.
It's exactly the point. That's why if you read the story specifically, you have to. It makes sense. They're coming to say you're learning all night, right? Now, why couldn't they say it's time for Kriyat Shema?
But Kriyat Shema, you've got a window.
A shorter window.
3 hours.
In Tefillah, you have a window 4 hours.
But I mean, my concern is always been, why did the students come? Did they come and disturb the Rabbanim at the beginning of the window or towards the end of the window?
So I think at the beginning of the window.
So that's a chutzpah.
No, that's what.
They got 3 hours.
That's actually this Mishnah.
No, they say Higia Zman. Higia Zman.
Yeah, it's not the time to daven Krishna.
It's not the time to daven Kriyat Shema.
Correct. That's exactly.
So it's got to be at the end of the window, Michael.
No. He gives man. He gives man. Kriyat Shachris means now it's time to go daven.
Right. So it's at the
Not
end.
at the end of the time. No, now is the time to daven now. Don't wait till the end. Now stop daven Kriyat Shema.
Impossible.
Okay. Well, now one of the things that we're not that careful, by the way, about, for example, this is halamaisa. People are not careful, right? Is when you daven early, especially Friday night, and you go home, and the rabbi says, don't forget to count Sfira and can't say Kriyat Shema. So Kriyat Shema is the whole year, right? It's not just Sfira time. But you're in the middle of the eating, right? I don't know very many people who stop the meal and say, oh, time for Kriyat Shema, let's stop and say Kriyat Shema, and then we'll go back to the meal. But it looks like that's what actually it should be. That's one of the discussions about whether people should daven early or not daven early. Because if you daven early, you should stop at Kriyat Shema. Usually at Kriyat Shema, you're still in the middle of the soup, or at least the main course.
It should be any time after 9:30.
No, it should be not every time at exactly 9:30, whatever the time for Kriyat Shema is.
But don't you have the entire night?
Yes, but exactly the point. When the time comes to do the mitzvah, you should stop to do the mitzvah.
Because the reason about this.
Correct. Because the mitzvah in the Torah, and if you don't do it now, you forget. So, but we're not knowing that way. The people are not knowing that way because they say we'll remember at the end of davening. We'll make ourselves a reminder. Sometimes you forget, unfortunately. But this Mishnah seems to say exactly that point. So even if you're learning, you still have to stop for Kriyat Shema. The part of the Masech that deals with Kriyat Shema in the Haggadah is actually dovetails with this. Now, why the rabbis didn't know was the beginning of time of Kriyat Shema. First of all, they did not have chronometers.
They were too involved.
And second of all, it's very hard to know exactly what the time for Kriyat Shema is. When would be Kriyat Shema? At sunrise. So you have to see the beginning of sunrise, right? And third of all, or whatever all we're up to, many people explain that this is really a group of Rabbanim who were sitting and studying during the Bar Koch revolts when they were on the ground. They couldn't
the windows
see.
Were closed and everything.
Right, they were in the caves. They had no idea what's going on outside. So at any rate, the story and the whole idea of being Maski Yitzias Mitzrayim, Bolam Hazeh, Bolam Haba, fits into a time of persecution in general. So at any rate, what we're saying here is this last piece of the Mishnah. That's why I said when we got this last time, I said we couldn't finish it. I said, well, this is a separate standalone piece because it's saying that the Mishnah is a standalone piece. The Tanya. Chaverim shahayu oskim b'Torah, mafsikin l'kriyat shema v'im mafsikin l'tefillah. Okay, so they don't stop for tefillah. Now, which kind of rabbanim are we talking about? Okay, so with that, no. So that we stop. What are we saying? That they stop for kriyat shema,
right?
But they don't stop for tefillah.
That's what it says.
So you could have a takeaway here and say, well, I should do the same thing. I'll just keep learning. Right, and I'll keep learning, and when I finish learning, I'll get up and daven. And you're such a great Talmud Chacham and have such a smada that you start learning at, I don't know, it's 7:30 or 7 o'clock here in the winter, and you don't finish learning till 11 o'clock. The time for davening is over. And that's what it really looks like. It could be a mafsikin l'kriyat shema v'e mafsikin l'tefillah. So in other words, they don't even have to stop for tefillah. So, and the concern is these guys are learning and learning. So the Gemara actually says, Am Rav Yochanan, Lo shanu el kagon Rav Shimon bar Yochai v'chavei Rav. The only people we're talking about who seem to have this dispensation that they don't have to stop for tefillah is these guys of Shimon bar Yochai, who is the purported author of the Zohar, and all these other guys who are great scholars and so forth. V'shetarasam u'manasam, that the Torah is their actual.
That before.
Their trade, okay. Aval could go on Anu, but us. This is who's us? Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, who is the greatest Amor in Eretz Yisrael for many years before and after his existence. He's the last of the great Amoraim. Right after Rabbi Yochanan, the situation becomes very difficult. So when Rabbi Yochanan is quoted everywhere, especially in Yerushalmi, if you think of Bavli's quoted, he's quoted in Yerushalmi a lot. Aval could go on Anu, mafsikin l'kriyas shema u'tfilah. For us guys, like all of us around this room, when it comes time for Kriyat Shema and davening, so we have to stop for Kriyat Shema and davening. Then we can go back to learn. Our learning is not of substantive enough significance that we can put on hold davening. We have to daven.
It implies Rabbi Yochanan is saying, the implication of Rabbi Yochanan is that the only people for whom they can say Torah is their work, is their occupation, is Rosh Hashanah Bar Yochai and his group, period.
Oh.
That's the implication.
The implication is the only people who have the right to stop, the only people who have a right to defer davening are people who are great scholars. And by the way, this has been applied. If you study some of the Gedolim, you find that they did not daven b'minyan. So they were learning. So when they finished their learning, they had a set seder, they would daven. If there was like a little shtot, and there was only one minyan, they missed the minyan. So that doesn't apply to us. No matter if we have a seder before or after davening, we got to make the davening. With the minyan. Obviously, the assumption was minyan, not davening by yourself, right? So us, we don't have that. So notice for us, when we come to learn, we have to build our learning around the times for davening. Right? The assumption, by the way, is that people daven shacharis at the earliest possible time, right? And that's probably even true today. Right?
You have to go to work right away.
Whatever we live in a non-Jewish society which creates less flexibility. But even in the Jewish society, people went to work.
Yeah,
they went to work when the sun came up. So they.
It's reason matimim, right? That's the operative rule.
That's the operative rule. The other operative rule is you're probably not going to be able to stop work at 10 o'clock long enough to daven.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so we do it on Shabbos. Correct? But that's really the extent of it when we defer davening. Shabbos is because, of course, you're sleeping in, right?
You don't have to go to work and all the rest.
Correct, and so forth. All right, so this becomes, by the way, the normative halacha that if you're going to study, no matter how significant our study is, and even though Shema and Torah Shema is a form of Torah, but it's a separate mitzvah, and even though davening is going to be a break in the trend of thought of learning, we have to stop for Shema and we have to stop for Tefillah. Okay, yep. There's a completely separate topic then from not going to the barber or not going to the tannery, because people are going to study, it's not about going into a process. I know there's a train of thought, and you want to do something complex, you require a long period of time. But the truth is you can break your study into shorter periods of time than you can in terms of tanning a skin. Tanning a skin is going to take you so much time. Going into the bathhouse, you have to allocate a certain amount of time. Barber is going to take whatever the time is. These were elaborate haircuts, if you remember. Talk about the haircut of, who was it? But it was like the Kohen Gadol. So, that's a hairpiece. That's not a haircut. That can be flipped, okay? So the Gemara says, wait. So the Gemara has a very one question on this. It's assuming that the greatest scholars, therefore, have to stop at least for Kriyat Shema. Right. Okay, so it's not a big break. Right? How long is it Kriyat Shema? It's not the same as Hachana for Tefillah and so forth. So the Gemara says, Yatanya, we have a brayso that says, Kishem she'en mafsikim l'tefillah, kach ein mafsikim l'Kriyat Shema. Oh, that in other words, you don't break. Not only you don't break for Tefillah, you don't even break for Kriyat Shema. The same way you don't break for Kriyat Shema. The same way you don't break for Tefillah, you don't break for Kriyat Shema. Now, who is that talking about? It can't be talking about lightweight scholars. Right? It can't be like us, because we are going to be mafsik for Tefillah. Right. So, is it going to be talking about the heavy-duty scholars like Rav Shimon Bar Yochai? But even Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, it seems to say that he has to stop for Kriyat Shema. So what's going on here? Which group of people is this all about? Kishem shemafsikin l'tefillah kachem mafsikin l'kriyat shema. So the Gemara says there's one exception to a rule about the complexity of learning and planning that impacted on all of Klal Yisrael that got a dispensation that they were allowed to continue uninterrupted. And that's when Chazal met for Iber Shana. Now, you open a calendar and you power up your app and you look when it's going to be the next leap year. But the reality was there were all kinds of complex calculations that go into when they were going to declare it was going to be the B'Shana. Not just that, but sometimes it was very difficult to find a place to do this. You find that they go up to the Aliyah, where they lock themselves in. They lock themselves in the chamber.
So this will only be during Adar Aleph?
No, this would be end when they decide that they're going to add an extra month.
Which is another Aleph, isn't it?
Correct, whether that would be correct, right. But the calculation could be done at any time, right? It would, I guess it would be close to Adar Aleph. Sure. Correct, right.
I mean, you have to do it actually before Adar Aleph.
Correct.
To decide if it's an Aleph.
So actually you don't.
No,
actually you don't. For us it sounds kind of difficult to understand, but you have to do it before the 30th day of Adar, which is already could be the beginning of the next month of Nisan.
Then you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know in that Adar if.
Yes, I know. You would say, "Well, we blew it already. We leaned the Megillah the wrong time." Right, correct. But that was actually one of the Ein Bains that we had in Megillah. It talked about. I'm trying to remember who it was. Whether it was Chizkiyahu. There were 6 things he did. 3 things he had the blessing of Chazal, and 3 things he did not have the blessing of Chazal. The one that did not was he was Ma'aber L'Shana on the very last day of Adar, which that last day is going to be a transition day between the end of the month and the beginning of the next month. So, but it actually appears for us it's very difficult to understand. How could you have suddenly go through one Adar and suddenly realize that Purim is next month?
Right.
I mean,
especially since you already.
Right. We got to come back again. Okay? Got to get Adlo Yada again a second time around. I guess you just say it was rabbinic mitzvah. Gemara doesn't seem to discuss that. I mean, the more complex piece, of course, it throws everybody's bar mitzvah off for the rest of the year.
Obviously, yeah.
Kids are now a month younger.
Kids been studying.
Huh?
Not to mention your preparations for Pesach.
Well, you would get an extra month.
Yeah.
You get the bonus. So, I mean, but it's a lot more ad hoc. The whole idea, like as much as Rosh Chodesh was ad hoc and relied upon witnesses, declaring when the extra month was going to be was also ad hoc. Now, by the way, looks a lot more like scientific calculations and agricultural calculations than Talmudic calculations.
Yeah.
I mean, you can learn the sugyas about Ibur Shana now. It's not that complex. And we believe the Chazal were versed in the astronomy of their day.
Absolutely.
So they would know where the Earth was, where the constellations are.
How the roads were.
Right, so there's all these complex that goes in where the Earth is in relation to the constellations. Is it falling out of whack? Is it too early? Is it too late? Does it need rain? Do we have to wait for more rain? Is it too rainy? Are the roads passable? The roads not passable? How's it going to play out if we extend it? How's it going to play out in Sukkot when the pilgrims come and start heading back? If we add the month now, what's going to happen in October? So all of this is done, and there's a tremendous sense of responsibility and communal obligation to set this up. And where it gets done is sometimes fraught with difficulty because the Romans and other persecutors knew this was the first thing to take down was the calendar. If you don't have a calendar, people don't have a calendar, they can't keep a culture. Right? You can't keep Yom Tovim. You don't know what's going on.
For Yid, for Goy, doesn't matter.
For a guy too. Lahavdil for a guy too.
The guy just looks at
Sure.
the sun, he figures good.
No.
Like Yid, you can't have a calendar. You
Yeah,
can't.
And you have to remember the Christian calendar is probably also based upon, to a certain extent, what our calendar is.
In the French Revolution, one of the first things they did,
Absolutely.
they messed with the
Gregorian calendar.
to
Update
make it
mess
decimal.
up the
Jew-
religious people.
Right, the Julian calendar becomes the Gregorian calendar. That's
No,
something
they
else.
had their own.
They had their own thing.
They wanted a
They
10-day
changed the
week,
names of the months.
10-day week,
Uh-huh.
a 30-day month.
I think it's 8-day week.
No, they wanted 10. They wanted everything decimal. 10-day week, a 30-day month. Every month should be 30 days. I think it was like 5 days at the end of the year. They added a special.
Oh, is that what they did?
Didn't catch on.
Did they watch for like 10 hours
They
a day or
read
something?
Well, they wanted everything with the decimal system.
Oh, it was like a 10-hour a day watch.
I don't know about the 10 hours.
Well, at any rate, so
Only the French.
right.
Only the French.
Didn't catch on.
I think the Russian Revolution
Yeah,
did something similar.
Yes. But that's what the Gregorian, that's why the October Revolution's in November. Yeah, no.
What? Okay.
It's an extra 12 days.
But no, that wasn't.
The Gregorian calendar was a change by Pope Gregory,
Yeah,
and it
that-
took a while until
Julian.
That was in the
Julian.
17th
correct.
century.
When that took a while until it caught on to
Yeah,
different
because they were off by
countries.
14
Why
days
the
or
Russian
something.
had the-
Because he wasn't accepted by the Eastern
The Eastern Church.
Still today,
by the
still.
Orthodox.
Still going by the
Still-
Julian.
Still isn't.
Right,
Yeah,
correct.
because
Yeah, they
put in
still have it.
I still have it,
the
right.
calculation was off because of
Greek
the
Orthodox still
leap
have a
year. I
different
forget now
calculation.
exactly. But the calculation-
Redeemer.
It's so much
Which-
better with Hillel's calendar.
Absolutely.
Wait a minute, Hillel's calendar, when he was Hillel Cotton.
Yeah, Hillel
Yeah,
Cotton, Hillel Shady.
yeah, that's
Okay.
it.
Some of the
So, yeah, at any rate, yeah.
We know they stopped.
So the bottom line is, the Gemara says, Kitan Yahi Be'ibur Shana. That's about Ibur Shana. That's when they would come together, and they would go up, there'd be 7 elders, and they'd go up to an aliyah, which was the second story. They'd lock the door or take away the ladder, and they would discuss back and forth whether they would make a decision for a leap month or not leap month, depending on spring, on the agriculture, on the trees, on the seasons, and so forth. Okay.
Yes, they do what, once every 2 years? Well, not every year.
Correct.
If they've just had a leap year, they're not going to have another one next year.
So I don't know that it was out of the question necessarily, depending on the road conditions.
But you can only have 7 in 19 years.
Right. We've had some very difficult winters. Now it's hard for us to say because we don't know the difficult winters that go into Pesach. Is it an early Pesach or late Pesach? Right, but if you go back, and this is simply anecdotal, you probably can look at Pesachs that have not been extremely early, that have been very difficult for snow. So you've got this horrible winter. Chazal are going to sit down in March and say, if they didn't have snow, they had rains, they had mud, and they're going to say the roads are not going to be dried out for Pesach. What are we going to do? They'll say, well, last year we had a leap year. So they'll say, well, we'll have another leap year. So we'll go for 4 or 5 years without one. So that's why there are all these subjective calculations that need to go into the hopper that are very weighty, right? Because the implications are not just for now; it spills over to the year after and the year after until they catch up.
Turns out that there's an English word I actually looked up as once I was playing with this, with the Jewish calendar, that in 19 years, exactly 19 years, the moon goes through every possible combination of phase or something that it can once, and comes back like exactly
intercalculation?
All had to do with the
Intercalation.
moon. All that's different in 19 years, that just starts right over again.
It's intercalated.
That's in our standardized.
Right.
the small.
It's 7 times every 19 years.
I'm saying with our kind, we
Well, I'm saying-
our Ibush.
But all I'm saying is this is correct.
Why did we
But
do
it-
19 years? Why did we
Because
do
that's the cycle it rotates around. That's correct. But the
That's
reality
to match
was
the sun, right?
A small cycle or
Right.
something.
You've got to calculate the difference between the lunar year and the solar
Yes,
year.
yes, and they have to
And
match
in
at
a
some point.
19-year period.
Yes.
They come out the
if you have
same.
7 additional months.
Exactly.
Then you're
Yeah.
going to, they're
Exactly.
going to come out.
Yeah, yeah.
Every 19 years, they come out
in the
the same.
same way that I believe that there could have been in the winter months especially, a number of 30-day months on the calendar back to back to back.
There could have been, as long as.
Right, because they're waiting for the moon. Because you can't shorten it down until the moon shows up on the 29th day. If the moon is covered by clouds and nobody sees it, so you just make another. And then you have a summer that probably was made of a whole bunch of 29-day months.
Right.
Yeah.
But in the end, you better balance it all out.
So when they did the calculations manually, in this case here,
I think the Gemara says that they had a tradition. There was never a Chodesh Mu'ubar on Elul. Right? The long month was never on Elul, which would make sense. It's the end of the summer when they're trying to do catch-up for all the long months that took place in the winter. So in other words...
If you have like 6 months in a row where you have 30 days.
No, not 6 months in a row, but you may have 3 out of 4 months in a row.
Okay, doesn't matter. Eventually, you're going, is that not going to lead to the
To a 20
necessity to have
to a 26-day month?
Yeah.
No, you can't have a 26-day
I know
month.
you can't, so you got catch up there.
You got to catch up. That's right. You fall back. I'm not saying it's radically that you have 6 months in a row, but I'm saying the chances are that you're going to have in the space of 3 months you would normally have 3 short, 3 long.
Right,
But it's very possible at the end of the winter you had 4 long months,
for sure.
right? On a rare occasion, maybe 5. 5 after 7 months, you had 5 and 2.
Why?
then-
Because they could never see it. So what would happen?
Oh,
So they
because they
would see the
couldn't see
moon
it.
on the 26th day, but they're still obligated to keep the month until you reach the end of the 29th. I believe you can't make it less than 29 days.
No, it's got to be 29 and 30.
So what role do the witnesses play
They come and say we saw the moon. But
But
if
we
no
learned-
one,
But they would have seen the moon on about day 26 of the month if you've had several months which were too
30s,
long.
30s, yeah.
So I mean,
But we learned together that at the end, they didn't really go by the witnesses, right?
Right.
We
When you
learned that.
have 2 months
At the
in
end,
a
they
row
figured
that are
out
30
something
days,
the Torah says
then
witnesses.
the day that you lost in the first month, you earn back it, you win it back into the second month.
But
you
if
have
the
not
se-
lost anything.
but if the second month is cloudy, you don't get it back. That's the problem.
Yeah, if you
Right.
resynchronize,
Right.
whatever the right word is.
Anyways,
Just one day,
off topic, back on
Yeah,
topic.
yeah,
So,
come on, guys.
all right. So, Kitane Hibi Bashana, the Amrav Ad Bar Hava, Vachentani Sabi de Hegronia, that's the name of a place, Amrav Elizabeth Tzadok, Kishahayino Oskin Beibur Ashana Biyavna, when we did Ibur Ashana in Yavna, this is right after Churban Abayis, when they reconvened in Yavna, probably maybe the second time in Yavna, Lo Hayino Mafsikim, Lo Lekriyat Shema, Lo Letfila. So there we have the testimony of Rav Elizabeth Tzadok, to say that they wouldn't break for anything, not even for Kriyat Shema. They went straight through with no break whatsoever. It's like Lahavda when the white smoke comes up the chimney.
Is this Rav Tzadok? Is the
I don't know. I don't know if this is the famous Rav Tzadok. I don't know if this is
Really
his son.
famous family
Okay.
sounds like.
But it's I don't know. I don't know who he is. So, but I'm assuming if it's talking about Yavna, they met in Yavna in 2 different cycles. They went to Yavna obviously after Churban Abayis. They rotated around. I believe they came back to Yavna the second time.
He says,
Couple
it
generations.
sounds like he was part of that.
Yes,
So
it's an edus. So he's quoting Rav
Yeah.
Elazar Tzadok. This is the generations after Churban Abayis that we were doing it. Okay, there was the whole discussion when it becomes impossible to do Ibur Shana and Eretz Yisrael. Could they take in Chutz La'aretz? And that's of course why eventually they publicized the calendar because it couldn't be done.
So, you lost me. You're saying doing it every Shana
When if
one-
you can't do the Ibur Shana,
The extra month.
right? You can't do the extra month in Eretz Yisrael. Can you do this outside of Eretz Yisrael?
then your whole calendar.
No, can you do it outside
You
of
have
Eretz
the
Yisrael?
meeting outside.
You have the meeting of the guys sit up in the attic in Babylonia.
I'm lost. I don't get it. How can you have a? How can you, in the Eretz Yisrael you don't have the extra month? But
No.
he means no.
The guys can't get
Mixed up.
together. In Eretz Yisrael, the Romans are beating Jews to death,
Oh,
so they
so
can't.
you-
So
oh.
can you now do this outside of Eretz Yisrael?
I'm sorry, I
Calculations
misunderstood.
outside.
Can you
Oh,
do
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah,
Can
yeah.
you find the place?
authority goes-
right. We can't get into this classroom. Can we go to another
Yes,
classroom?
the authority
okay?
goes to both. Okay,
Not
sorry,
the authority. It's a whole thing back and forth. Okay.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
So because of the significance and because the holidays relate to it and everything, so there's a special one-up dispensation for this group, not one-up, but a special for this group, that they're allowed to not just skip Shema, but skip Tefillah, and they go straight through until they come to kind of some resolution. Okay. At the end, that's the end of the Mishnah. Now we come to the end of the Gemara. Now we come to the Mishnah. Okay, back in Shabbos. Okay, this is all about stuff that you should be careful not to do Erev Shabbos as you get close to sundown, because what will happen? You'll forget and continue doing it after the sun goes down. Of course, you should be in shul, but some of
I have a feeling most people wouldn't, but yeah.
well,
In those days, I'm sure they noticed the sun going down.
so you'll see the cases have a lot to do with professions.
Right, sure.
Okay, so I know we all have this idyllic vision that people closed up Friday at 12 o'clock. They went to the mikveh, came to shul early, and started saying Shir Hashirim. Okay, but these were working people. Okay, lo yetzi achayit b'machdo samach lachashecha. Chayit is obviously a tailor, and he has his what do you call his needle. He shouldn't carry his needle outside right before, as you get close to sundown. Why? Shema yishkach v'yetze. Because we're afraid he'll continue going after the sun goes down. He obviously he must have davened an early mincha, so he's not running to shul, and he's going to continue walking with the needle. We'll see in the Gemara, by the way, that he may not be carrying the needle. Right? It doesn't say he's carrying it. What does it say?
He's with it.
He's with us. So where would it be?
It could be stuck into his...
Could be stuck into his lapel. Exactly right. Correct. Stuck into his lapel. Okay? Go to a good tailor. Right? So, lo yetzei achayit b'machto samach l'mincha, shema yishkach v'yetzei. Lo halavler b'kol mosu. A lavler was a letter writer. Okay? So a scribe. Okay? A scribe. And he would have his pen around. So he always has his instrument handy. So you shouldn't go out with his pen. Probably also, once again, we don't know if he's carrying it or he puts it into whatever, his pocket, over his ear, I don't know. Now, that's 2 things. So those are pretty clear. Now, the next one is a little more complex. V'lo yefala es kelov. And a person yefala means you shouldn't take lice out.
Like what?
Lice, L-I-C-E.
Lice, oh, lice.
Okay.
Actually, vermin.
Vermin, well,
Okay,
what,
okay.
Lice is
That's
definitely
what-
kind of vermin.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, no, but
that's,
vermin. I think it was like mice or something.
No. Oh,
so this
oh,
is
vermin
real,
means any kind of animal
vermin
you
means
don't-
any kind of, like, could be
Okay.
living
cockroaches,
creature you
right?
don't want.
Okay, fair enough. Okay,
Right,
fine.
but in this case, it probably means lice. It makes sense that it makes lice. Okay, if in fact, if you look in Rashi, Rashi says meva'er kinim mibagadav. Okay, so kinim are clearly lice. Okay, so I'm sure you can find an old Haggadah that translated as vermin. Okay,
Oh, I see.
so for us, it sounds kind of gross to hear that people are pulling lice off of their clothing. But this is the world that existed before Nix or whatever those sprays or those potions
Caleb
are.
isn't, it's his clothes.
Caleb means
actually.
clothing, not utensils,
Yes,
right? And that's
Yeah,
by the way,
Caleb means clothing.
that's a common usage. So if you couldn't control them and or you couldn't lick them, then at least you could control them by getting them off of your
Sure.
garment. Now, the question, what's wrong? What does this refer to? Does this mean
Yeah.
you shouldn't do this right before Shabbos? Okay, right before Samach l'Chashecha. Does this mean, on the other hand, you shouldn't do this on Shabbos? Is this an issue of a Shabbos issue that you shouldn't pull lice off? And what would be wrong with pulling lice off? Is it muksa? Are we afraid that you're killing lice? Or are lice, if you kill lice, is actually considered murder? Yeah. So, and is this a continuation of the previous part, or is this a separate item? So we've already seen that sometimes in the previous mission you get disparate objects that are things that go back to back, right? So the first two clearly talk about Erev Shabbos.
Right.
First two are people who professionally went around without, with their item, and they had this as their utensil that they use. This is a utensil that can't be used on Shabbos, so it would automatically make it muktzah. And more importantly, not only it's more than it's muktzah, it's not really considered usage for Shabbos, so therefore you can't carry it on Shabbos. The assumption is, right, that therefore you'll be carrying it in a Rishus Harabim. So, and they carried it all with them all the time. The question really is about the licing thing. Is the lice about carrying or doing it close to Shabbos, or about not doing it on Shabbos? And look at the next thing. V'lo yikra la'or haner. And you shouldn't read la'or haner. You shouldn't read by candlelight. Now, that clearly is not about Erev Shabbos, right? So that what's wrong with reading by candlelight? And then there, you may adjust it. And we'll see actually a case between, I forget who it was, who there are two versions, and the story says, I know better than the Mishnah, right? Either he did adjust it, or he almost adjusted it, and he caught himself at the last minute. So this is not about this is not about our illumination that's fairly bright. This is about reading with a very fickle candle that you would want to adjust. First of all, you would want to adjust it, not just to adjust to get more light, but if it begins to fizzle and to go out, you'd want to adjust the actual wick
This is
itself.
all before Shabbos or near Shabbos or on Shabbos?
So this clearly is on Shabbos.
On Shabbos.
So this clearly is on Shabbos, right? So there are 4 items here so far. One is about the Chayat, one is about the Lavlar. Those are Erev Shabbos, going into Shabbos. That's, by the way, the connection to the previous Mishnah. Item 3 and 4, which is about the lousing and about reading, look like they're clearly not about before, they're about on Shabbos.
It was a cloudy day, like you couldn't read.
At night, or at night, correct? Or at night. Or you had like, I don't know, what they must have used in Shul, must be something brighter, I don't know. Or Haner is a single lamp.
But the average person didn't have much more.
Right,
than
if you
that,
ever see
probably.
like, the standard Nair that you're probably talking about is you ever see these, looks like these Aladdin type of things, that they had these oil buckets.
Oh, you mean
right?
like a thing with...
And it has a wick coming out. So that
front,
was a
yeah.
standard thing that we know exists from the time of the Romans. That's in there, that's one there. So one candle, power, candle.
But what about, you wonder about Shabbos candles, for example?
Right, so,
That'd be a perfect thing to read.
well, the answer is we're not reading by them.
Well, let's say you wanted to read, but say after you
Right.
finish the meal,
Right,
you
so I
wanted
said,
to learn a
the
little Torah.
heter that we use is we're not dealing with that kind of light. We're dealing with a very steady light here that's not flickering one on the other. We're not dealing with one candle, right.
I'm talking
So I
about
imagine
that.
in Shul, this was not in the Shuls of those days. This was not the issue, because there may have been external light, especially in the morning, especially if they davened Shabbos and they went to the field. But more importantly, they probably had many lights. It wasn't la'or haner.
No, but I'm thinking back, 'cause this sounds more like it's addressed to an individual, not to a whole shul. It sounds like you're home.
Yeah, correct.
So I'm saying, you're home, your wife made Shabbos, she lit candles,
Means
whatever.
you read during the day, you didn't read at night, correct. That's right. We forget how difficult it was to read it, to learn at night. We also forget how expensive it was to own candles. Right? The Misha Berach, Misha Nosnim Ner Lama'ar.
Yeah, but
Candles.
Did the woman light candles on Shabbos? Or
Yes, she did. The issue is not
My
about
wife,
light.
right.
The issue is not about lighting lights. The issue is about reading.
So that's what I'm saying.
So when you-
that's what bothers me. She lit the
Before
candle,
Rabbi-
and we went to the expense
You don't
already.
do extinguishing it to save on the wick or on
Right,
But when you
correct.
do it on
And
Shabbos,
so this, by the
that's
way, is eventually why the second parak is going to lead to Bamem Madlikin. Okay,
Yeah.
so now we're going to have a long excursus because the Mishnah afterwards gets off topic about told you about Tumatara, gets into another topic, but eventually that's why I said Bamem Madlikin comes after this. So you're right. This is not about lighting candles. It's about reading specifically. Reading is a very tedious
absolutely.
letter by letter. I don't know how people learned in the Middle Ages.
Please.
Did you ever look at an old Ksav Yad? These are not illuminated Haggadahs with big letters. These are tiny letters.
Yeah, Rashi.
And the Sofer is
What about it?
in a difficult handwriting for us because it's a script, and it's a script so that Sofer could write it fast. Right? And the Sofer is writing it fast because the faster he writes it, the more he can write it, the more he can get paid. Right? And he's writing it by candlelight too, probably. Because he wants to finish work late into night so he can finish up this much and more so he can do more and more. Right? And they sometimes put letters together, they sometimes abbreviate words. I really don't know how people learned. So at any rate, this is really about reading by candlelight. Now here's one thing that Gemara is going to... I'm sorry.
Maybe most people didn't.
At night.
Yeah,
Correct.
except for the
Many
few.
people couldn't read
Correct.
it.
Right.
Yeah, except for the few people. Yeah.
Right. I was reading about the Medrash that says that Bnei Yisrael slept in for Matan Torah. You know
Right,
Why do people stay up at Shavuos night? Because
Right, I
Bnei Yisrael
read
slept
that.
in. We know it's a Yalkut. And normally you read this like this is a terrible sin they did. They didn't wake up. They slept through the alarm. Kadosh Baruch Hu had to throw them out of bed. But if you read the Medrash carefully, it's not that clear that this actually was a punishment. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu rewarded them. It almost looks like that they slept. This was the best time of year to sleep.
Yeah.
Right? It says there's no bugs bothering them. It's not a short night. The winter time, they have these long nights, but it's freezing. The summertime, it's okay at night, but it's very short because a lot of daylight. Springtime is the actual proper time, but at night people went to sleep. Okay, so when we stay up, it's not like we're atoning for what they did necessarily. We're just doing things differently than what they did because we now have the Torah. At any rate, back in here, just one point that the Gemara will talk about it is, so we have 4 items here. We've seen that item 3 and 4 are not connected to 1 and 2. 3 and 4 are different Shabbos. The question is whether item 3 and item 4 are connected. So specifically, the idea of, I told you about what's the question about taking lice out on Shabbos? Is it a problem that we're afraid you might kill the lice? Or is...
Trapping.
Oh, you trap the lice,
I
okay?
mean, trapping, like you.
Where does it say don't carry the light?
It says kill, lo yifaleh. We just...
The lice, lice, I thought it said light.
Lice,
Right.
L-I-C-E,
Lice,
lice,
yeah.
okay?
Right.
So is the problem about killing them or manipulating them or whatever it is, or is the problem, the Gemara is going to discuss whether the problem really is taking out lice through the Or HaNer. Okay? So in other words, is it really lo yifaleh et kelav or lo yikra l'Or HaNer? Or is it lo yifaleh et kelav kama v'lo yikra l'Or HaNer? It's going to be a discussion in the Gemara. Okay? It could go either way. So that would make it a whole separate thing. Now, that would make sense. The same way that it's difficult to read by candlelight, and if the light begins to flicker, you want to adjust it, you're looking for these tiny little nits that are in your clothing, your sweater, and your jacket, whatever you got.
Yeah.
So you really, if the light flickers, with that little bugger's getting away, you want to go get it.
Absolutely.
So at any rate, and then the Gemara says, and this clearly is a continuation about the part about reading with the candlelight. Be'emes amru, be'emes really they said. Okay, so be'emes sometimes used it to be a term as a really old halacha, like this is accepted halacha, or maybe halacha Moshe Sinai or something. So be'emes amru here it's not halacha Moshe Sinai. Chazan by the way does not mean a chazan. The chazan usually means the shamus, or in this case it means the malamed.
Supervisor in the Talmud.
Well, he's
period.
more.
It says here.
He's the.
What does yours say, Arjun?
It says supervisor in the Talmudic period. The word did not denote synagogue reader as in modern times,
Right.
but was applied to various
Functionaries.
e.g., the person who supervises children studying the synagogue.
Right.
That's a
The
malam.
beadle.
Yeah.
The beadle is the shamus.
Right.
The court crier, that's the guy who would wake you up in the middle, wake you up to go to shul. The janitor at
Well, the beadle is usually all of these guys, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, a
Right.
janitor.
So there could be a shamus. In this case, it's a shamus, or it looks like it's more of a malamed.
Okay.
So be'emes amra hachazan roa hechan tinokus korin avahu lo korei. So the chazan or the malamed can see where the children are reading, but he can't read from where the children are reading through the light of the candle. The kids don't know any better.
Able to, or he shouldn't.
He shouldn't. Knows he shouldn't read. They got these kids reading Aleph Beis, Breishis
Right.
Bara.
Right.
So the chazan is there, the shamus is there to make sure they're actually doing the reading. Breishis Bara, right.
Right.
So these are kids, these are simple kids, they're going to read it. He
Right.
says read the word, they read the word. But if he reads the word from the book, from the whatever they're reading from, if he can't read it, so he's going to read it from the Or Haner. So how will you ever have Torah study going on for children? That's the primary idea here. So the answer is he's not reading it from the book. He's just making sure the kids got the right place. This guy knows it's upside down and backwards. He's been
Right.
teaching the same Breishis Bar for these kids for kids in generation after generation. So that's what it means. He knows he can see where the kids are reading,
Right.
but he can't read from it. He can recognize with the general structure of what the writing is where they are. Okay, now. Last piece of this Mishnah, unrelated. Okay, even though it says kiyotzebo. Okay, kiyotzebo. Okay, kiyotzebo. Lo yochal azav im hazavo mimnei hergel aveiro. Okay, so a zav is a man who has these types of seminal emissions. Right, that makes him tummy. Right, a zabo is also a discharge. So they are tamei. Right, and you cannot have relations with a zaba, right? Many of our halachas of nida have to do with zaba, actually, right? So you have a zav and a zaba, and surely a person who is tahar and a zaba can't eat together, right? Can't eat from the same plate. But even a zav who himself is so dysfunctional and is tamei and probably unable to have relations with anyone, can't eat with the zaba even if it's his wife. In the same way that a tahar can't eat with a zaba even if they are married. What's the concern? Mipnei hergel avera, because we're afraid if they will eat together and eat off the same plate and so forth and so on, A leads to B leads to C, and consequently one thing can lead to the other. This really, the Gemara will have a discussion about Zav and Zaba. There will be actually a little bit of Tumatara thrown into this Gemara about this, but you'll be able to get through it. But the Kiyotze bow seems to be very far-fetched from what we did in the previous part of the Mishnah. What's the connection? But the connection is actually fairly connected. Connection is if we allow you to do A, you may come to do B. So if we say that a Zav and a Zava can eat together and share the plate, who knows, it may eventually lead, because of the power of sexual attraction and instinctive urges and so forth, that they may come to have relations with one another. As Rashi says, surely a tahar with a Zaba. So therefore, if you allow A, you may come to B. The same thing is, if you allow the shamas to read from the Oraner, or you allow a Talmud Chacham to read from the Oraner, he may come to adjust the candle on Shabbos itself, right? So that's the Kiyotze bow. They look like they're very far apart. So far, so good? Okay. So we have a structure here that has a whole bunch of stuff thrown together. One piece is we have about Erev Shabbos, then we have about the Yafala, the lice, then we have a reading by the candlelight, then we have the Zav that gets thrown in for the end, just for good measure. Okay, so far, so good. Now, so says the Gemara, Lo Yetzei Achai B'machto Samach L'Chashecha Shema Yeshkach V'Yetzei. I'm sorry, I'm reading. I'm sorry, my mind jumped back. Tanan Hasam. Sorry. Lo Yamod Adam B'Rshus HaYachid V'Yishter B'Rshus HaRabim. Okay, this is a Mishnah in Masechet Erevin. You are in a Rshus HaYachid. The water is in a Rshus HaRabim. Okay, you have a water fountain in Rshus HaRabim. You're in Rshus HaYachid. Okay, or a pool of water. So you're not talking about carrying the water in. You're simply leaning over into the Rishus HaRabim when you're drinking from it. Right. Okay? So if you're in the Rishus HaYachid, and you can't to the fountain in Rishus HaRabim, Rishus HaRabim, V'yishter Rishus HaYachid, or vice versa, you're in the Rishus HaRabim, you can't lean over to the water, the cup that's in the Rishus HaYachid, right? Unless, Avalim Hiknis Roshav Ruba Lamakom, Shuso Shotem Mutar. unless most of your head and most of your body is in the domain where the water is. So if you are standing, let's say this is Rosh Hashanah, this is my foot, but I'm leaning over here, this is Rosho and Rubo, that's okay. Right? What's the concern? I'm drinking.
Right.
So the concern is that if I'm standing here, instead of just putting my head in, I'll pick up the water and take it out. Right? You think of it, you pick up a cup of water, whether it's a cup, a pitcher, whatever, you'll take it close to yourself. If I'm standing here, so if I just reach over, right, or I just put my head in, I'm liable just to pull it back to myself. However, if I am so situated that most of me is in the other rishus, just part of me is outside in the rishus side, the other rishus, so I'm not going to bring it to me because most of me is where the water is.
Right.
Okay, now this seems to have nothing to do with anything.
what we've been
right? Okay, so far so good. Okay. V'chein begat. Okay, and the same thing is a gat is a press for grapes, a grape press, right? A wine press. So which would mean now we don't know exactly what this actually means. What's v'chein begat? What would you guess it would mean?
Well, you lean over to some wine again. I don't
Right,
know.
correct. And the same thing on Shabbos, that you lean over for some wine. It's not just about water. You have a wine press that's got wine must or wine mush or something, right? So you would lean over. Why would that be important? I mean, it looks like it's the same kind of case.
Why would it be different than the water?
Why would it be different than a regular cup of water? In the first case, it looks like it says Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah.
Right.
Right. So the second case, the God, it looks like it's something that's not exactly Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah. It identifies it as a God.
Usually they're like, you see in Israel, the archaeological things, they're like carved out of stone with walls.
Correct, and then you press down on them, and they
just-
come out on the bottom.
They just
Well,
stomp them.
stomp
They
them.
stomp them. And they didn't like today. They stomp on it.
Yeah.
But here's what Gemara is going to say. The God is not really a Rosh Hashanah. It's not around the Rosh Hashanah. What is the area around this wine press?
So someone's field.
Somebody's business.
Someone's field, or the end of someone's field, or someone's yard. So no, at best, it looks like it's going to be a Carmelis. So the ostensible second two words, or the last two words, could be right about. It's not just Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah. It could also even be Carmelis to Rosh Hashanah. Right, I'm in the house, and the God is outside my house. So that's the wine in the God is not a Rosh Hashanah, it's not a Rosh Hashanah. It's this big God, open God. So but the Gemara is going to actually say it means something else. Okay, let's see how far we can get, guys. Okay, so the Gemara says, so that was it's a very funny sugi because it opens up with this Mishnah. It doesn't tell you what the Mishnah relates to our Mishnah yet. Absolutely. So far so good, but you understand the case. Ibai lahu. So the Gemara now asks a question. Carmelis mai. Okay, so in other words, what is the law about standing in Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah and going into the other thing that's not a Rosh Hashanah, it's a Carmelis. In other words, the first part of the Mishnah talks about Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, the first Mishnah in Eruvin. Yeah. The second half of the Mishnah says God. It doesn't tell us what it really is. I told you what it looks like it could be. But the Gemara says, what is this all about? Carmelis mai. What about if it's not a Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah, but it's really into in a case of a Carmelis, such as it's in a bikko, it's in a valley. Valley is not really Rosh Hashanah. People don't go through, so it's going to be a Carmelis. It looks like a Rosh Hashanah. People don't go through, so it's really a Carmelis. So Amar Abaye. So Abaye and Rav Machlokas. Amar Abaye. He. Okay, Carmelis, and for this case of drinking the water, it's going to be the same thing as Rosh Hashanah, the same thing as a Carmelis. Rav Amar, he gufa gzeira, v'ana nekam v'nigzar gzeira l'gzeira. Why, if I'm standing in a Rosh Hashanah, why can't I drink from Rosh Hashanah? What's wrong with that? I'm afraid that I may come to take the water into my Rishus.
Right.
Well, that's a gzeira. I didn't. We're saying that we're going to make a gzeira. You can't take the drink in the other rishus because I may come to pull into my rishus. Now we're saying that doesn't only apply to a Rishus Harabim. What if it's only a Carmelis? But a Carmelis is only a rabbinic extension.
Right.
So in other words, I'm saying I have a Carmelis which is only really rabbinically prohibited, and I'm concerned maybe on the rabbinically prohibited I'm going to do a rabbinical prohibition. I'm going to take it in. I didn't. So can I build a Gezerah on top of a Gezerah? That's the machlokas. Shvus l'shvus, or in this case Gezerah l'Gezerah. Correct.
What's the difference between Gezerah? Same thing?
Shvus means all the rabbanon. The Gezerah is I may come to do something. Right? I guess, right? This is more of I guess they could be the same. Okay, right, I guess it's the same. So Abaya Amar Abaya he it's the same thing. In other words, Carmelis and Rishus Harabim is the same. Rav Amar he gufa gzera, not nekim gzera. So what did Abaya say? Abaya says Rav says no, you can't make two levels. Abaya says no, I can. Right? I can extend it even for a Carmelis to Rishus Yachid. And some along Abaya says Amar Abaya. Mino aminale. How do I know this? Tekatani v'chein begat. Because the Gemara, the Mishnah that we just quoted in Masechet Eruvin on the bottom gave me two cases.
Right.
The first case was identified Rishus Harabim, Rishus Yachid, Rishus Harabim. Second case is God.
Right.
What's the God? So I already gave you away. I gave you away the what Abaya is going to say. So the Katani v'chein begat. My God. What's the chiddush? Give me the same case about wine. Wine and water is different. What's the difference of a wine press and a water fountain? So the Gemara says, my God, Tanina. If we say God, we learned it. Tanina. We have Elav Carmelis. Okay, no, we're talking about, it must be that God is a Carmelis. So the first case is Rishus Harabim comes along by to say. The second case is Carmelit to Rishus Yachid. So that's extending it even for a case of Carmelis. I can't lean it over.
Right.
So far, there's no connection to our Mishnah that we just learned.
Right.
This is all about this case about the God. Okay, so Rav Amar, no, the case of God is something else completely. The Chen begat le'inyan meiser. It really has nothing to do with Shabbos.
Right.
It has to do with meiser. Okay, let's see if I remember this correctly. Wow. Okay. In order to be chayiv meiser, you have to eat bekfiyus. You have to eat food in a way that is a set meal. In other words, if I'm picking grapes, if I'm picking grapes, I don't have to give meiser. So while the pole is working, he's allowed, right? He can't put in his pocket, but he can eat. But he hasn't given meiser on this. The answer is because he's really not eating the finished product. The product is still in process. Even when the product is collected, as long as I'm not sitting down to a meal in kfiyus, that's still okay. I'm grabbing the parts that are there. So in the case of the God is as follows. Let's see if I remember how this goes now. Okay, so if I'm drinking right in the gat, if I'm in the gat and I'm drinking in the gat, that's considered shtiyat arai. That's not considered a set meal, and I'm part of from giving meiser. As long as the actually hasn't come out of the gat into the pit that it rolls into. Yeah. So as long as I get my mouth, I can drink out of it. Right. That's fine. I'm in the gat and I'm drinking in the gat. Okay, if on the other hand, if I take it out of the gat and I'm outside the gat and I take the wine out of the gat to myself, that I can't do because I'm already removing it from the gat. Okay, that already makes it already kavua. And I've taken it out. I'm not going to put it back. Right. Because once I take, would you put it back? No. Well, you might. Okay, but we'll assume for a moment in this case you can't. Right. So therefore, if I take it out, as long as I'm in the gat, I'm fine. If I'm out of the gat, it's not about Shabbos. Here is the wine in the gat. I'm outside the gat. If I pull the wine out of the gat and I take it to me, and then I can't take it without meiser. However, if I'm leaning over the gat, most of my body is over the gat. That's the case that we're talking about. V'chein begat. No, it's not about Shabbos. It's a Shabbos. I can't do it for Shabbos. It's about taking out. But v'chein begat, the same thing about leaning over, is going to apply to the case of making something kavua for meiser. Okay. So in other words, it's not about a Carmelis. Because Rava says about Carmelis is going to be Gzeira to Gzeira. So it's really about something completely different. I can't do it for Shabbos. Right, for Shabbos, if I'm leaning over, it's fine. If I'm over here and the water is here, I can't drink, simply drink because I may pull it out. If I'm here and the God is here, I can't drink from the God because I may pull it back to me and then it's out of the God. Unless I'm Rosh over Rubos leaning over the God. Because if most of me is leaning over, I'm not going to pull it away. I'm going to drink it over the God. And I still can actually put it back in the God. If I really have something over, I put it back in. It'll still ferment. Correct? Okay, let's see. We'll just do maybe 1 or 2 more lines. We'll get to a place we can stop. Because we really haven't gotten to the Chayat yet. So Rava says, V'chein begatlin yin meiser. V'chein amar Rav Sheshes, V'chein begatlin yin meiser. Okay? Right. So, the Tznan. And we have a Mishnah that seems to support this, that there are different shitot. The shitos, it's 3 lines, but it's fairly easy to go through. Shotin alagad bein al chamin bein al atzonen upater div Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, if I want to drink wine hot, I want to add hot water to the wine. When I pull it out, I want to warm it up, then I can drink it over the gat, and I don't have to give meiser, because I'm probably going to drink it all. Now, who says that? Rabbi Meir. Right. Rav Eliezer Rab Tzadok Mechayev. Rav Eliezer Rab Tzadok says no. If I drink it cold or hot, the moment I take it out of the God, I've separated now being kavua. And Chachamim omrim acham and chayev al tzonin pater mipnei shu machzir samotar. Chachamim have the third sheet, which makes actually most sense. That if it's hot, I take it out and I warm it up, I can't ever put it back into the vat. Why not?
It's a different temperature.
Because it'll kill the fermentation.
Okay.
It'll kill the wine. Will never be able to ferment afterwards if I put hot wine back in. So the must is coming off. This is raw must coming off of the pressed grapes. The raw must is now going to have to be fermented. If I now boil the wine before it ferments, it retards the process. So therefore, if I take the wine out hot, I'm never going to put it back. If I take the wine out and keep it cold, I drink it, that's still not kavua. Because if I don't want to take it, I'll pour it back in. I don't have to take it away from the gat. So these 3 shitot are simply just variations on drinking from the gat. And on this opinion comes along our Mishnah to say, okay, so therefore we're going to follow the opinion that says I can drink it as long as I'm over the gat. If I'm away from the gat, I can't. Unless, if I'm away from the gat but I'm leaning over the gat, I can. Okay. So this is really as far as we're going to go. Okay, now what it's really going to lead us into, just so we understand this, so we don't have to do this again next time, what does this have to do with anything? Garnished, okay? Right. Except the one takeaway from this is a machloka d'Abai v'Rava about whether you say gzeira l'gzeira. Right? Whether you make a drabanan, you can build another drabanan, which will have to deal with when the chayed is carrying his needle. Right? What if we talk about whether he's carrying it or whether he has it in his clothing? Right. If it's in his clothing, maybe that's like a shinoi. So it's really, even if it were on Shabbos, it would only be a Rab D'Rabbanan and so forth. And would we make the Gzeira Samach L'Chashecha, that he shouldn't go out with the needle because he may come to carry it on Shabbos, which may only be a D'Rabbanan. Right. So the takeaway that you need to keep in mind for next week, because we're going to deal with the Chayed next week, is about this concept of Gzeira l'Gzeira, or Carmelis to Rosh Hashanah, or making a 2-level kind of Gzeira itself. Okay? Perfect. So that's where we're going to get back to. So it's unrelated, but it really brings it right back in. Yeah. Okay.
And we learned something too, right?
We learned about winemaking.
Exactly. And leaning over and drinking.
I learned about that a long time ago.
And leaning over and drinking.